Hello and welcome to Turf and Touchdowns episode 4. We are live on YouTube, on Spotify, most places that you can catch your podcasts. Technically, this is episode 5, but we'll get to that in a moment. My name is Luke Elder, joined by my good friend Tom Collins for the third time this week. Tom, hi.
Yeah, hello Luke, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. We've seen quite enough of each other this week because the Preakness is upcoming. That's going to be our focus in episode 4. It's been take 2, we'll call it, for episode 4, because Muth is no longer a runner in the Preakness, so that means that we are re-recording the whole thing.
Yeah, well, he was going to be a short price favourite. We actually recorded our Preakness preview to go up on YouTube and all, podcast platforms early today, Thursday, which we're now re-recording on. We recorded on Tuesday. Muth got taken out on Wednesday. So yeah, take 2. The whole race has basically changed. That's why we have to go again. Normally, if it was, say, a 5-1 or 6-1 shot, we could probably just clip that bit out, but the whole preview was about Muth. So here we are again, Luke.
Yeah, me and Tom have been hit by a non-runner once in the past. That was an old podcast we used to do on American racing, where we were talking about Kentucky Derby, and we had 20 runners to go through. We did a runner-by-runner analysis. Every single horse was included, and we still didn't talk about the winner, because I can't even remember the name of the horse that came out, but Rich Strike got in, and he won at about $1 billion to 1, but that was good. So we thought we'd do the professional thing, we'd re-record.
Yeah, it's the right thing to do, isn't it? I mean, you know, we've all hyped about Muth being the one, and we barely touched on Imagination, Bob Baffert's other runner. So you know what would have happened. The original pod would have gone out. Most of the content would have been expired. Imagination would have gone and won, and everyone would be like, what are you talking about? So here we are, hopefully a proper preview now, and we can actually provide the winner at the end. Yeah,
the market I'm looking at the moment, that might be right. Okay, 6-4 about Mystic Dan, 9-4 in a place. Tuscan Gold obviously was relatively well found in the market as well. Is now 4-1 best price. Catching Freedom ran very well in the Kentucky Derby, is 9-2 best price. And Imagination, who we just mentioned, is also 9-2 best price as well. But a lot of bookmakers are sort of scrambling to try and refine their prices. Some of them will be waiting towards the weekend. But we'll start where we should with the Kentucky Derby runners, namely Mystic Dan and Catching Freedom. Obviously, well done, Tom Collins. He tipped the Kentucky Derby winner on this podcast. You're great. Well done.
Well, he's a podcast favourite, isn't he? I don't want to be tooting the trumpet 2 weeks after it happened, but 40-1, I mean, it was a great price at the time. You're not getting anything like 40-1 in the Preakness. 6-4, as you say, there was one firm, 9-4 with another. I think he'll probably go off favourite, maybe around 7-4 mark. If he goes off any shorter, I definitely wouldn't be interested in him. 7-4, I think, is fair. 2-1, look, if you're a loyal punter, whatever. Miss it down at 2-1 probably seems like a fair price, given he's already beaten half of this field. I just don't think he's going to get a very good setup. In the Kentucky Derby, he had everything go well. Brian Hernandez got to the rail in a perfect stalking trip. Coming into the home turn, the rail opened up, only by a little bit, and he still managed to scoot on through, and that probably proved to be the decisive factor. Sierra Leone and Forever Young were probably the best and second best horse in the race, but just because of the great trip and great ride, Mystic Dan won. 2-week turnaround, different pace scenario, not so much speed expected in this race. Will he get the same trip, and can he fire again? I don't know, Luke.
Yeah, that's the slight issue for me. And also, he was a really bad Kentucky Derby winner on speed figures, which I didn't overly expect. I think Mage last year was 104. Mystic Dan got 100 for winning the Kentucky Derby, which, I mean, that would be one of the lower Bayer speed figures I've seen in quite some time for a Derby winner.
Yeah, very much so. And if you do like the speed figures and you treat them as literal and you want to take them moving forward, and that's how you rate a horse, you won't be wanting to miss it down in this spot. I do think he was fine. Like, I actually was more impressed with him than Mage last year, albeit, as I say, he got the dream run through. Let's just say Forever Young or Sierra Leone won the race. I think they'd have got a better buyer than 100. So, I don't know. I think Mr. Dan was a decent enough Kentucky Derby winner without being a horse where we're coming out of the Derby being like, you know, this horse has a proper chance of the Triple Crown.
Yeah, I think one thing that helped Mage out speed figure-wise as well, they went a ridiculous gallop from the get-go, and Mage picked things up from sort of midfield, just behind midfield. But that's where Catching Freedom was in the run this time around. He ran very well. We were both keen on him from an each-way standpoint. If you're in the UK, we got 4 places and 5 places in places. So you will have been paid out on the place part of your bet. But Catching Freedom, I don't like him in this spot. I really don't think the Preakness is the race for him. I thought the Derby was his spot. If he was mine, he probably wouldn't be coming here because he's not got a great deal to gain. However, now with Muth out, Connections will be feeling a fair bit happier.
Yeah, I'd say so. Getting rid of one of the main protagonists in the race, Brad Cox will now be thinking, "Thank God I actually, declared him for the Preakness." He wasn't going to go there originally. It was kind of an 11th hour decision, but a horse that ran well in the Kentucky Derby. He probably thinks this Catching Freedom's just a 3-year-old this year. He's going to be the 3-year-old and then potentially retired at the end of the year, rather than thinking longer term with him. He strikes me very similar to a horse called Angel of Empire, who ran in the Kentucky Derby last year, finished third, I believe, and Catching Freedom was fourth this time around. They're just grinders. They plug on, and beat tired foes. The Preakness, there's not going to be much speed up front. Well, comparative to the Kentucky Derby, I just don't think he's going to get involved. He's going to be right out the back in the early stages. He doesn't have the early pace to really pester the market leaders up front. And he's just going to be sticking on at the one speed, maybe for fourth again.
Yeah, I generally don't really like hold-up horses in the Preakness full stop anyway. It's a tougher race to get into. That brings us to Imagination, who is anything but a hold-up horse. This was one of the horses on Frankie's 6 winners at Santa Anita that didn't manage to win, and that was the one that everyone expected to win that night. But comes here instead for Bob Baffert. I don't think Bob Baffert wanted this to be the one that he was relying on in the Preakness, because obviously Muth was the main runner, but Imagination is still very talented himself, and I think Frankie's going to remain on board. Has anything been announced regarding jockeys? Because Frankie was on board, and obviously Juan Hernandez was on Muth, but now Imagination is the one.
Yeah, I don't know. I imagine he will stay on board, but obviously Juan Hernandez is Bob Baffert's go-to rider, so it'll be interesting to see if anything transpires. Frankie's got experience on this horse, so I don't know. Given his stature around the world, Frankie Dettori, not height, but status, and his familiarity with the horse, I'd be surprised if Bob chucked him off for Juan Hernandez, but it's not come out on social media just yet. He's an interesting runner, isn't he? But if you go back a few months and you say, "Oh, I think Imagination's going to be the one for Bob Baffert in the Preakness," when you've got Nysos and Muth et al., you're probably thinking, this guy's crazy. So the fact that he's in here now and is relatively short price considering, I don't really want a part of him. Now, that being said, this is Bob Baffert. This could be Frankie Dettori. You get the outside post and an easy lead. We know what happens in the Preakness. He won it last year with a horse called National Treasure, who I just didn't like at all either. So Imagination could win, but he has to prove himself. Last time up, he was beaten by Stronghold. Stronghold wasn't a factor in the Derby.
No, not at all. He was fancied a bit of a price, but never really featured. That brings us on to the next big talking point, because on the podcast that we recorded, if you're on Spotify, you can still go and listen to that and listen to our thoughts before Muth came out, because we'd already released that on YouTube. Not quite the case. However, I was very, very keen on Muth and Tuscan Gold in a reverse forecast. I just felt that they were the two that were clear of the rest. Tom wasn't overly keen on having a bet. Has that sort of ideology changed now that Muth has come out, because you were between sort of the pair of them? Is Tuscan Gold now a qualifier as a bet?
I think so. Just about. He's around 4-1, 9-2, if I'm not mistaken, at the time of recording. I mean, anything can happen. We've already seen in the last 2 days the favourites come out. So I say at the time of recording, hopefully there are no more scratchings in here. And if he does go off at 4-1 or 9-2, or at least opens on Saturday at that price, I think it's perfectly fair. He's a very interesting horse. He's an eye-catching horse. He's a good physical specimen as well. First up, he ran very nicely behind Sierra Leone. Okay, that was a maiden. Sierra Leone wasn't the horse that we saw in the Kentucky Derby. He still was yet to progress. But Tuscan Gold wasn't asked for maximum effort, and he stayed on well for fourth. Came back to beat a nice horse called Skip the Line for Todd Pletcher, who I rate quite highly. And then last time up in the Louisiana Derby, I thought he ran perfectly fine to finish third, probably against a track bias. So with further improvement likely, and the fact he's coming into the race fresh, which is crucial here. We've already talked about Mystic Dan and Catching Freedom already having that run just 2 weeks ago. I think Tuscan Gold has to be the play. However, and this is a big caveat, you have to take the early price if you like him, because I think in the hour or half an hour before, the prices with UK firms is going to crash. They're going to crash, because on social media, I've seen all these wise guys selections, all of these analysts in the US loving Tuscan Gold. The likelihood is people are going to jump on the bandwagon. He'll probably go off second favourite here.
Yeah, I think we both like him. Look, if anything, I just got more confident on Tuscan Gold when Muth came out, because we're expecting the pair of them. I loved the run from Tuscan Gold last time. As you say, last time around Catching Freedom, Honor Marie were ahead. Honor Marie got crucified coming out of the stalls in the Derby. Catching Freedom ran very well. They ran very different races, though. Tuscan Gold was a horse who was midfield, then suddenly closer to the pace, made up a lot of ground in sort of the mid part of the contest. And any horse that sat close to that pace struggled effectively. Now, he's only had the 3 starts. He couldn't go to the Kentucky Derby, but they've come here instead. I think this is the ideal race for Tuscan Gold. I think he's the best horse in this contest. He ran to a speed figure of 95 last time around. That was only his 3rd start. He's getting better all the while. And I think Tyler Gaffalione's MO is going to be very clear. Let Frankie or Juan Hernandez come across you, take the lead, just try and stalk Imagination for as long as possible and then go past him. That seems to be the blueprint to winning the Preakness this year for me.
Yeah, I think he'll probably sit maybe 3rd or 4th early, depends which other horses want to go forward, but it seems like he'll have that stalking to midfield sit. And he reminds me very much of Blazing Sevens, who ran in the Preakness last year. However, I think he's got more talent. And the fact that Blazing Sevens managed to get 2nd, albeit in a pretty weakish renewal of the Preakness, this isn't much better. I think at least Tuscan Gold is going to match that position, if not win the race. And he's definitely the play for me, Luke.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree with you with Tuscan Gold. As I say, you can get our thoughts from before Muth was scratched and taken out of the contest. The reason he is taken out, by the way, he's got a temperature, so he's not feeling at his best and he won't be running in the Preakness. Maybe the Belmont is something that we could look forward to, but one thing is for certain, Tom, if Mystic Dan wins the Preakness, Bob Baffert is going to be sending everybody in the stable dog to Belmont, or not even to Belmont, to Saratoga, because he will not want someone else to win a Triple Crown.
No, absolutely not. Bob Baffert is the only trainer to have won the Triple Crown since 1978 with both Justify and American Pharaoh. So, yeah, he absolutely won't want it. And we know that what Bob Baffert's like. He's the Joker, isn't he? He's the guy that is kind of lovable, but also very much not lovable. And if he could stop someone else achieving the feats that he's done, he will.
Yep. That's a fair way to describe Mr. Baffert. I would say, let's look at the Preakness. Anything at massive prices that you could see running well? I don't think it's a race that's got a great deal of depth, to be honest.
No, I mean, Just Steel's this reliable horse who will always run his race, but he probably just lacks the quality to get involved. Seize the Grey represents an ownership group of, I don't even know how many thousand, but lots of people will be cheering him on. He'll probably take some money beforehand as well. But again, I just think he lacks the talent. We're just looking at the top of the market here, I think, in the Preakness this year. And fingers crossed, Tuscan Gold will be the one.
Yeah, I think it should be a lot shorter than 4-1, 9-2, whatever sort of price he is at the moment. He should almost be favourite, but that accolade will certainly go to Mystic Dan, and deservedly so, after he won the 150th running of the Kentucky Derby. But that is a look at the Preakness. As mentioned, this is effectively our 5th. You can catch up on our thoughts pre-Muth scratching on Spotify. This will be uploaded to YouTube, Spotify, and anywhere else you do get your podcast. We also have released an NFL podcast this week as well. So if NFL is your stuff, you can catch up on that. We release NFL podcast bi-weekly, and every single week we will be releasing podcasts regarding horse racing, albeit we haven't yet discussed anything Breeders' Cup-wise. That's a lot further down the line. I'd imagine we'll be a fair bit busier in that sort of era.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be going week by week with horse racing and obviously NFL each 2 weeks. But yeah, there will be anti-post looks, that's for sure, especially if a horse really catches their eye. I'm thinking of the Belmont going towards the Breeders' Cup Classic, for example.
Yeah, and good news, Saratoga, not too far away as well. So Classy Racing returns. We've had Keeneland a bit of a lull. Saratoga is coming back in the very near future. But that's episode 4.5 in the books for Turf and Touchdowns. Myself and Tom Collins will be back next week taking you through. Have you had a look yet?
I haven't had a look. Had a look, no. I think it might be the Pennine Ridge, but I could be wrong.
Whatever it is, we'll be here, sat in the same places covering it. But thank you very much for listening. You can subscribe to us on our socials, on Twitter /X, however trendy you are, at Turf Touchdowns, on any other form of social media, TikTok, Instagram. We upload frequently on there. We are at Turf and Touchdowns. But thank you everyone for listening to us today. Best of luck whoever you're playing in the Preakness, and leave a comment down below as well who you're playing in the Preakness and how you got on in the Kentucky Derby as well. Also, if you subscribe, press the red button just below us, then you'll be updated on any video that we do and when we post it. But thank you for being on board. Until we next speak to you next week, stay safe, look after other. Goodbye.